The affluent neighborhood of Maplewood, Connecticut, was the kind of place where secrets simmered beneath manicured lawns and picket fences. Life here was orderly, quiet, and predictable. It is a perfect setting for a storm to brew unnoticed. The peace of Maplewood was shattered one early spring morning when the lifeless body of Michael Carter, a 38-year-old advertising executive, was discovered in his luxury condominium. Michael's closest friend, Daniel Parker, had found him sprawled across the living room floor with a gunshot wound to his chest. The weapon, a Glock 19, was left near his hand, as though he had shot himself. The initial 911 call reported a possible suicide. But seasoned Detective Evelyn Morgan, who had been with the Maplewood Police Department for over 2 decades, knew better. Something about the scene didn't sit right. The investigation began with a meticulous survey of Michael's life. Michael was well regarded in his field and described as charismatic, ambitious, and sharp. He had no prior history of mental health struggles or financial woes. His death was a shock to everyone who knew him. Daniel Parker, his best friend, was among the most devastated. Detective Morgan noted something odd during her preliminary sweep of the scene. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle. The apartment was tidy, the doors locked, and Michael's phone and wallet were untouched. Whoever had been there was likely someone Michael trusted. As the coroner's team removed the body, Morgan inspected the surrounding area. A faint whiff of perfume hung in the air, a scent distinctly feminine. On a nearby coffee table lay a half-empty glass of wine and a smudge of lipstick. It didn't take long for Morgan to theorize that Michael had been entertaining someone before his death. A neighbor reported hearing muffled voices and footsteps late into the night, but there had been no commotion. With no immediate evidence pointing to foul play, Michael's death remained classified as suspicious. For Morgan, it was only the beginning of unraveling a web of secrets. Detective Evelyn Morgan wasted no time delving into Michael Carter's relationships, beginning with the person closest to him, his best friend, Daniel Parker. Daniel was the one who had discovered the body and called 911. In his initial interview, Daniel appeared shaken, repeatedly expressing disbelief at Michael's death. He claimed he had stopped by Michael's condo that morning to drop off a set of golf clubs they had planned to use over the weekend. Daniel spoke of Michael's charm and success, painting a picture of a man who seemed to have everything. Married to Amelia Carter for 10 years, Michael was known as a devoted husband. Yet Daniel's words didn't entirely match the subtle tension Morgan had observed between him and Amelia during the initial questioning at the crime scene. Amelia Carter was strikingly composed during her interview. She described her marriage as stable, but admitted they had recently experienced some rough patches. When pressed, she cited Michael's demanding work schedule as a source of strain. However, her answers were carefully measured, and Morgan noted her reluctance to divulge much about her private life. As Morgan began reviewing Michael's phone records, emails, and financial transactions, a more complicated picture of his life began to emerge. Text messages exchanged between Michael and an unknown number hinted at a relationship that went beyond friendship. The messages were flirtatious, laced with innuendos, and often ended with plans to meet at his condo. The unknown number was traced to a burner phone, a red flag indicating that Michael had been keeping secrets. Morgan also uncovered that, despite his outward success, Michael had recently withdrawn significant sums of cash from a joint bank account he shared with Amelia. These transactions coincided with messages arranging meetings with his mysterious companion. The detective began to suspect that Michael's outwardly perfect life hid deeper, more troubling truths. Meanwhile, the autopsy report added new layers to the case. The bullet wound was consistent with a close-range shot, and traces of gunpowder residue were found on Michael's hands. However, there were also faint bruises on his wrists, suggesting a brief struggle. The toxicology report revealed the presence of alcohol, but not in excessive amounts, just enough to suggest a social drinker. As Morgan pieced together these fragments, she returned to Michael's condo to scrutinize the scene further. It was then she discovered something previously overlooked, a faint smear of red lipstick on the rim of the wine glass next to Michael's. It was a different shade from the one Amelia had been wearing at the time of her interview. This suggested another woman had been there with Michael on the night of his death. The subtle clues pointed to an intimate betrayal. But by whom? Morgan's instincts told her that this was no random act of violence. It was personal, calculated, and born out of emotions too intense to contain. With no definitive suspects yet, Morgan knew the secrets of Maplewood were only beginning to unravel. Detective Evelyn Morgan's investigation continued to dig deeper into Michael Carter's seemingly perfect life. With every uncovered detail, it became clear that the outward appearances of stability and success masked something darker. The burner phone tied to Michael's mysterious messages had led nowhere, its registration was untraceable, but Morgan remained confident it would eventually reveal its secrets. Morgan decided to revisit Michael's closest relationships. She paid another visit to Amelia Carter, hoping to unearth inconsistencies in her story. This time, Amelia appeared more guarded, her responses abrupt and deliberate. She reiterated her claim that Michael had been distant in recent months, but denied knowing about any extramarital affairs. Yet Morgan couldn't ignore Amelia's demeanor, a polished mask of composure that seemed to hide simmering emotions beneath. The detective also examined the dynamics between Michael and Daniel Parker. While Daniel presented himself as a devastated friend, Morgan sensed an undercurrent of tension in his recounting of their friendship. Daniel admitted to occasional arguments with Michael over trivial matters, but maintained they were close, almost like brothers. Still, his alibi for the night of the murder seemed airtight, corroborated by a dinner reservation and witnesses at a nearby restaurant. The forensic team's progress on Michael's condo provided Morgan with her next lead. Tiny fibers found on Michael's clothing didn't match anything in the apartment, suggesting contact with someone who wasn't part of his household. Additionally, fingerprints on the wine glass with the lipstick smear didn't match Amelia's or Michael's, but were yet to be identified. These findings fueled Morgan's theory that another person had been present during Michael's final moments. Morgan expanded her inquiries to include Michael's colleagues and acquaintances, looking for potential rivals or secret relationships. Among those interviewed, one name kept surfacing in whispered tones: Lauren Davis. Lauren was a marketing executive at Michael's firm and had recently resigned under mysterious circumstances. Her co-workers described her as ambitious, charismatic, and frequently seen in Michael's company at office events. Morgan tracked down Lauren, who had moved to a neighboring town. When questioned, Lauren denied any romantic involvement with Michael, but admitted they had been close friends. She claimed she left the company to pursue a better opportunity, brushing off rumors about her and Michael. However, her evasive answers and visible discomfort during the interview made Morgan suspicious. Meanwhile, a breakthrough came from Michael's financial records. Alongside the unexplained cash withdrawals, there were hotel bookings under Michael's name. Bookings that coincided with weekends when Amelia had been out of town visiting family. Surveillance footage from one of the hotels revealed Michael entering with a woman who wasn't Amelia. The grainy footage obscured her face, but her figure and hair color bore a striking resemblance to Lauren Davis. The mounting evidence pointed to a hidden affair, one that might have been the catalyst for Michael's death. Yet Morgan couldn't ignore the possibility that Amelia's stoic demeanor concealed more than grief. The lipstick smear, the burner phone, the financial withdrawals, each clue hinted at layers of deceit and betrayal, but the puzzle remained incomplete. As Morgan studied the threads of the case, she knew she was circling closer to the truth. Someone had wanted Michael Carter dead, and they had gone to great lengths to make it look like a suicide. The question was not just who, but why, and what secrets would be revealed when the truth finally emerged. Detective Evelyn Morgan felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to align, but clarity remained elusive. The case was rich with tantalizing details: a burner phone, lipstick-stained wine glasses, financial irregularities, but nothing definitive to tie them all together. Still, Morgan pressed on, confident that persistence would reveal the truth. The breakthrough came when forensic analysis of the lipstick smear provided an unexpected lead. The specific shade and brand were identified, one rarely sold locally. It was a detail too unique to ignore. Morgan ordered a thorough cross-check of local retailers and purchases, a painstaking process that yielded a surprising match. Amelia Carter had purchased the exact lipstick several months earlier. The discovery didn't implicate Amelia outright, but added weight to Morgan's growing suspicion. Amelia had claimed ignorance about her husband's secrets, yet the evidence suggested she was more involved in his private life than she let on. Morgan decided it was time to apply more pressure. When Amelia was called in for further questioning, her composed facade began to crack. Faced with the lipstick evidence, she admitted to knowing about Michael's infidelity. "I confronted him about it months ago," she revealed, "but I stayed. I thought we could work through it." She insisted she had no involvement in his death, though her voice wavered as she spoke. Morgan noted the shift in Amelia's demeanor, but didn't press further, for now. Instead, she turned her attention to Lauren Davis, Michael's suspected lover. Surveillance footage, receipts, and testimony painted a damning picture of an affair. When questioned again, Lauren reluctantly admitted to a relationship with Michael, claiming it had ended weeks before his death. "I didn't kill him," she said firmly. "I didn't even know he was dead until you contacted me." Lauren's admission confirmed Morgan's theory of an affair, but didn't place her at the crime scene. More troubling was Lauren's revelation that Michael had been under significant stress in the weeks leading up to his death. According to her, he had confided in her about feeling trapped and hinted at conflicts with Amelia. "He said she was more controlling than anyone realized," Lauren added. The investigation took another turn when the Glock 19 found at the scene was analyzed. The gun was registered to Michael, but a key detail emerged. The prints on the weapon didn't match his alone. The partial prints of another individual were present, though degraded enough to require further analysis. As Morgan reviewed the evidence, a troubling pattern emerged. Michael's death seemed less like an impulsive act and more like the result of a calculated plan. The wine glasses, the lack of forced entry, the smudged lipstick, all pointed to someone who had shared an intimate, volatile relationship with him. Morgan's instincts led her back to Amelia. Her calm exterior, her knowledge of the affair, her access to the weapon. Each detail added weight to the growing theory that Amelia knew more than she admitted. Yet without concrete evidence, the detective couldn't act. Instead, Morgan chose to focus on the psychological threads of the case. What drove a person to kill? Was it rage, jealousy, fear, or a desperate attempt to reclaim control? Whatever the motive, Morgan knew she was on the verge of uncovering the full truth. The detective knew that the investigation was approaching a critical juncture. The trail of evidence pointed firmly toward Michael Carter's inner circle, and the noose seemed to tighten around Amelia Carter. But even with mounting circumstantial evidence, Morgan needed something definitive: a confession, an eyewitness, or an indisputable link between Amelia and the murder weapon. Forensic experts provided a breakthrough with the partial fingerprints on the Glock 19. After days of detailed analysis, they identified the degraded prints as belonging to Amelia Carter. This finding placed her in direct contact with the weapon, contradicting her earlier statements that she had never handled the gun. Morgan saw the discovery as the turning point she needed. The next piece of the puzzle came from Michael's financial records. Among the unexplained cash withdrawals was a substantial sum transferred to an account traced back to Lauren Davis. When questioned again, Lauren confessed that Michael had given her the money as a severance of sorts, ensuring her silence about their affair. Lauren maintained her innocence regarding the murder, claiming she had no contact with Michael in the weeks leading up to his death. With Lauren's involvement now clarified, Morgan refocused on Amelia. She ordered a comprehensive analysis of Amelia's phone records, revealing several calls to a local attorney specializing in family law. The calls coincided with the period when Michael had been withdrawing cash and growing increasingly distant. It became evident that Amelia was preparing for a divorce, or at the very least, was exploring her options. Morgan pieced together a timeline that painted Amelia in an increasingly suspicious light. Her deteriorating marriage, knowledge of Michael's affair, and recent contact with a divorce attorney suggested a motive. But the final piece came from an unexpected source. A neighbor of the Carters came forward with a tip. On the night of Michael's death, she had seen Amelia leaving the house in a hurry, carrying what appeared to be a small bag. The witness didn't see Amelia return until much later, after the time Michael was estimated to have been killed. This testimony placed Amelia outside her alibi and at the heart of the crime's timeline. Confronted with this new evidence, Amelia was called in for questioning once more. Her initial composure wavered as Morgan laid out the findings: the fingerprints on the gun, the timeline, and the neighbor's testimony. Amelia denied everything, claiming the prints could have been from a previous time and that the neighbor must have been mistaken. Her denial, however, rang hollow under the weight of the evidence. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the crime scene uncovered one final clue. Traces of gunshot residue were found on Amelia's car door handle. This detail placed Amelia in close proximity to the gun on the night of the murder, solidifying Morgan's case. Morgan knew she now had enough to arrest Amelia, but she wanted to ensure the case was airtight. With the mounting evidence, a picture of a calculated crime began to emerge. Amelia, feeling betrayed and desperate to end the emotional and financial strain of her husband's affair, had staged the scene to look like a suicide. The lipstick-stained wine glass, the lack of forced entry, and the placement of the gun were all deliberate choices meant to mislead investigators. As Morgan prepared the arrest warrant, she reflected on the lengths people would go to protect their secrets. The truth about Michael Carter's death was almost fully revealed, and the final chapter would unfold in the courtroom, where justice would be sought for a man whose life ended in betrayal and violence. Detective Evelyn Morgan executed the arrest of Amelia Carter with meticulous precision. Officers arrived at the Carter residence early in the morning, armed with a warrant. Amelia, still in her robe, was visibly shocked but offered no resistance. Her calm demeanor as she was handcuffed only deepened the tension. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains as the once-respected widow was led away. At the station, Morgan presented Amelia with the culmination of the evidence against her. The fingerprints on the Glock, the gunshot residue on her car, the neighbor's testimony, and the inconsistencies in her alibi painted a damning picture. Still, Amelia maintained her innocence, claiming the evidence was circumstantial and could be explained away. The prosecution, however, was confident. The case against Amelia was strong, bolstered by a clear motive: Michael's affair, the financial strain, and her apparent preparations for divorce. Prosecutors argued that Amelia had grown desperate, enraged by her husband's betrayal and the prospect of losing her lifestyle. They presented the staged crime scene as a deliberate attempt to mislead investigators and escape justice. The trial began under intense public scrutiny. Amelia's defense attorney argued that the case was built on speculation and that Amelia had no direct motive to kill her husband. The defense claimed that the fingerprint evidence was inconclusive and could have been from a time when Amelia had handled the gun during her marriage. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Mills, countered with a compelling narrative. They painted Amelia as a woman scorned, pushed to the brink by her husband's infidelity. Mills emphasized the timeline of events, the physical evidence, and the psychological underpinnings of Amelia's actions. Witnesses were called, including the neighbor who saw Amelia leaving the house, and forensic experts who testified about the gunshot residue and fingerprints. Lauren Davis was also called to the stand, reluctantly sharing details of her affair with Michael. Her testimony highlighted Michael's intent to end the relationship, which further weakened Amelia's claim that she had no knowledge of his actions. Lauren's revelations added a layer of emotional complexity, showing the Carters' crumbling marriage from an outsider's perspective. Throughout the trial, Amelia remained composed, though her occasional glances at the jury revealed a flicker of anxiety. The defense tried to humanize her, portraying her as a loyal wife who had been blindsided by Michael's infidelity and trying to salvage her marriage. The turning point came when the prosecution unveiled a key piece of evidence previously withheld to avoid jeopardizing the case. A fragment of a text message recovered from Amelia's phone, deleted but retrieved by forensic analysts, read, "I can't keep doing this. I have to end it." The timestamp matched the night of Michael's death. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution explained the implications of the message. It suggested premeditation and a clear intent to end her husband's life. Amelia's attorney tried to argue that the message was taken out of context, but the damage had been done. After weeks of testimony and deliberations, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Amelia's stoic facade finally crumbled as the judge handed down her sentence, 25 years to life in prison. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the gavel struck, signaling the end of a trial that had captivated the town. As Amelia was escorted from the courtroom, Detective Morgan watched with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. The case had been solved, but it had left a trail of shattered lives in its wake. Morgan reflected on the fragile nature of trust, the destructive power of betrayal, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their secrets. Amelia's story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers of secrets and unchecked emotions. As she stepped out of prison years later on parole, she faced an uncertain future, forever marked by the choices that had unraveled her seemingly perfect life. Thank you for listening to True Crime Pulse. Share your thoughts on the story and like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next episode when we bring you more crime stories, stay safe.